Episode 7 of The Penguin has just been released, and when you think the show couldn't get any better, it does that very thing. Following on from the end of episode 6, with Sofia being stood in Oz's apartment and watching Vic and Francis dancing, we knew that this episode was gonna be a big one. It's a penultimate episode of an HBO show. They're renowned for being big. With a backstory to Oz finally being provided and us truly understanding what happened to his brothers, we saw the parallels that were there with Oz in the present day. And that was also a theme that was common with Sofia too. Parallels of the past catching up with you and being there in the present day. With an ending that provided a great cliffhanger as we entered the season finale, let's delve into the episode and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is The Penguin episode 7 ending explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Oz. This episode opened up with us seeing a flashback to the time when Oz was younger and he had his two brothers Jack and Benny still around. What was so important about this was that it showed us where the burning love that he had for his mother was born from. He cared for his mother deeply in the present day, and we always thought that maybe it stemmed from the fact that he lost his two brothers and became the only one that was there to look out for her. However, in reality, he loved her so much that he basically allowed his brothers to die so that he could have her all to himself. This opening scene not only established that, but it also showed us the admiration that he had for this gangster called Rex that we've heard about throughout the entirety of the show. He saw the life that Rex led, the respect that he garnered from the people around him, and he wanted that very thing. Even having the confidence to be able to speak up to him when he saw him in the streets. You often think that Oz wants to be like Colin Farell in heading up the Empire as he lived in his shadow for many years. But that isn't who he wants to be. He wants to be Rex Calabrese. There was a haunting realization in the flashback where we saw that the very place that Oz left his brothers to die actually became the very place that Oz set up his Bliss Operation headquarters. When the brothers were playing flashlight hide and seek, Jack and Benny hid in a deeper level of the sewer. And when Oz found them, he reacted negatively because he thought that his brothers were being rude and mocking him, and just essentially making him feel inferior because of his leg. However, that wasn't the case at all. This is something that we've seen impact Oz all throughout the show. For example, in episode 1 when Alberto demoralized Oz, in the previous episode where he was called the Penguin, and even in the most recent episode when one of Sofia's henchmen called Oz the Penguin too. Oz doesn't take kindly to being made to feel inferior, and it usually has consequences, like with Alberto. This was something that he even did to his brothers, locking them in the overflow of where the water filled up and where they eventually drowned. Oz clearly knew what would happen to them in that moment, but all he could think about was getting back to his mother and spending one-on-one time with her. He had multiple opportunities to save his brothers, but he chose not to. The thunder mimicking the banging on the door as the brothers were dying, and the rainwater being collected by the jug on the ledge of the window as it was overflowing was reflective of what was on the horizon, and that the boys were going to die a slow and torturous death. Oz had a very evil mindset from a very young age, and even when you look at the main reason as to why he did it, to be with his mother, it's still the very reason as to why he's doing what he's doing in the modern timeline, to give his mother the life that she wanted and he promised her. We also heard the birthing of the motivation of giving her the penthouse, something that he still quoted in the present day. Towards the end of the episode, where there was the flashback of Francis and Oz dancing together, we saw the sheer amount of pressure that she put on him in order to be a success. This was because she felt that she deserved a nice life and she wanted him to be able to give it to her. With only one son instead of 3, it meant that Oz had to take on the burden of all of that responsibility. It's definitely a bit toxic, as it's a lot of pressure for a young child to have on their shoulders, and probably a reason that contributed to him being as ruthless as he was. Francis said to Sofia that Oz was 2 steps ahead of the game, and when Sal took him to the sewers, we saw that he actually was. This was an area in which Oz knew well, and when the power was cut, he was able to fight Sal in the dark. However, what was devastating for Oz was that Sal died of a heart attack mid-fight. Something that was fitting for Sal, but it took the pleasure of killing him away from Oz. Hence the firing of the bullets into him post him dying. Oz did make sure that Sal was the last person that he looked at and heard though, as he told him that he won and that he beat him. Oz wanted the triumph and he almost felt cheated there. Oz taking the very ring that Carmine took off of Sal when he took him down was symbolic of Oz feeling as though he was now on top. It was also very similar to when he took the coin on the day that his brothers died down there. a haunting token that represented 2 different occasions of death. In the conclusion of the episode, we saw that Oz believed that Sofia had killed his mother and that she was in the back of the car, just like how Alberto was there for Sofia to find. But that wasn't the case at all. I was actually expecting it because Sofia said how she wanted him to feel the same pain that she felt, and that would have definitely done it. But there was a twist. There was actually a bomb in the back with 20 seconds to go, and in true Oz fashion, he abandoned his army and left them for dead, just like we've seen him do on multiple occasions throughout the season, most notably with Sofia in the parking lot. However, the flashback even showed us that he's been abandoning people from a young age, as that's what he did to his brothers. It showed that Oz actually only looks out for himself and his mother, and maybe Vic. With him walking through Crown Point, the very place that he wanted to build back up, it was in tatters and ruins because of him. The very district he was raised in was rendered to rubble, and it was reflective of the state that Oz was in and everything that he'd done that had led him to that point. What the explosion happening tells us is that Sofia no longer cares for Oz's bliss operation. It's been burned to ruins, which shows that her intentions are to just kill Oz and to make him pay and suffer for what he did to her brother. Oh, and in going back to parallels, water causing destruction to Oz's brother's life in the tunnels when he was younger, and fire being the very thing that caused it in the present day was a contrast, and it was quite nice. The explosion led him to the very spot where his brothers were killed, and it was extremely haunting. However, unlike his brothers who died there due to the rising water, it became a safe haven for Oz in escaping the fire and symbolically walking into the light. Death and life was another contrast that occurred. Another parallel that occurred, which I thought was quite nice, was when Oz was preparing for Sofia to arrive in the tunnels. He said, "A storm is coming." A storm was obviously the very thing that killed his brothers when they were inside of the lower level of the tunnel, and with him saying that, it basically meant that death was on the horizon, and it did arrive for a lot of his men, as they died due to the explosion, so the storm did come. Sofia Giganti realized in this episode that she was becoming the very thing that she swore she never would be, and the person that she despised most in the world, her father, Colin Falcone. It was through visiting Gia where she saw herself in the broken child that was sitting on the bed. She was suffering due to her mother being killed and not truly knowing what happened, just like how Sofia spent her childhood growing up. She was lying about what happened to her family just like Colin Falcone did to her, and she realized that she wasn't actually forging a new pathway. She was just taking over an empire and running it in the only way that she knew how to. As Sofia was walking through the hallway of the children's home, she was having flashbacks to when she was inside of Arkham, a moment which instantly showed us the connection between herself and Gia and their feelings. But what's interesting is that the showrunners actually repurposed the set of Arkham and transformed it into the children's home. This was so that there was some kind of similarity and that it would be felt not only through Sofia but also us, the viewer, when watching it. Sofia has clearly let go of the bliss operation because she blew it to smithereens. However, what it also showed us is that her saying that she wanted to make Oz pay and feel the pain and suffering that she did. It means that it's going to be the very thing that we witness occurring in the season finale. I'm in two minds on whether or not she'll kill Francis, because Sofia did have a moment of sympathy for her when they were together and talking, especially when Francis started having an episode, so I don't know if she'd use his mother as a pawn to the point where she'd mindlessly kill her, but I can't see a world where Oz, Sofia and Francis all survive, so one of them is most likely going to die in the season finale. The main thing that I want to know in this episode though is, what's Vic cooking up? We didn't see him for the entire episode other than in the opening scene in the present day, so I'm intrigued to see what army he's going to bring to Oz's side. My review of the episode. This was probably my favourite episode in the entirety of the season so far. I know episode 4 was incredible, but this one was even better. It was an episode that I just didn't want to finish and I could have kept watching it. The clarity that it gave us on Oz and it showing us why he's like the way that he is was just perfect, and I don't think it could have been told any better. The use of the flashback was just right, and the casting of the young Oswald was top tier. He performed the character so well, and it genuinely felt like we were watching a younger version of the Penguin that we've come to know over these past 7 weeks. Parallels and contrasts were a main theme of this episode, whether it be Sofia or Oz. We had Sofia and her mimicking her father's behavior and transforming into him without even realizing. And we also had Oz and the fact that he was hoping to build a new life for his mother on top of the very ground where he condemned his brothers to die. It was just poetic, and it's not often you get arcs in stories that line up and go together so perfectly. The performances in this episode were some of the best that I've seen. There were great moments by everyone, but one moment that stands out in particular to me was the conversation that occurred between Sofia and Francis. The delivery of Francis's dialogue, where she was just so quietly confident over Oz and the fact that he was going to take her down, it was spine-tinglingly chilling to listen to. She knew her son, and she knew exactly how he was planning on things playing out. It was definitely a standout moment for me. I also thought the death of Sal Maroni was one that was unexpected but rather fitting. This was a man that loved his family deeply, but he had lost them all at the hands of the man that was in front of him. So him having a heart attack because he basically had a broken heart due to his family all being killed was a somewhat appropriate way for him to go. We've only got one episode left of the season, and I can quite comfortably say that this is probably the best show on TV right now. I'm excited to see where the story's going to go and how they're going to wrap it up. I'm hoping we've got a long episode in the finale, maybe like an hour and 15, because I want as much time as possible in this universe before we're removed from it for a period of time. I think they'll stick the ending. They've delivered in every corner so far, so I don't see why this would be any different. So, there you have it, The Penguin Episode 7 Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on the Penguin getting broken down, then click on the card in the top corner, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.